All right, so are you ready to clone ourselves? Well, not quite.
No.
Today, we're cloning something a little bit different. We're diving into the world of Oracle database cloning. It's kind of like instead of just hitting Control C and Control V on a file, imagine making a full replica of an entire city's worth of information. And you might be wondering, why would anyone even need to make a replica of a database?
That is a fantastic question. Imagine you are a software developer and you're working on some kind of complex application. You need a safe space to test out all your new code or new features without really risking the live version. Cloning gives you that safe space.
Oh, so it's like having a backup city where you can just kind of mess around and break things and it won't affect the real city.
Exactly.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So you sent over a ton of articles and notes on this, and it looks like there's more to it than just clicking duplicate. What exactly is cloning when we're talking about these Oracle databases?
Cloning is all about creating an exact copy of an Oracle database, but without using those traditional export and import methods. It's more like taking a snapshot of the database in time, capturing every single detail and creating this perfect mirror image. Everything's identical, except for the name of the database.
So it's like a true copy, like everything is exactly the same except it has a different name.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But why not just use the traditional export-import method? Isn't that kind of simpler?
Not necessarily. Imagine you're trying to copy a massive library book by book. Export and import is kind of like copying each individual book, which is really time-consuming and inefficient, especially for big databases that are constantly being updated. Cloning, on the other hand, is like using a magic duplicator. You can instantly create this perfect replica.
It's like speed and efficiency.
Exactly.
Got it. Now, let's talk about how this actually works. The sources you sent mention a couple of different cloning methods. One of them is cloning with cold backups. What is that?
A cold backup is basically a snapshot of the database taken when it's offline. Like we're pausing all activity in the city before we make that replica. And that cold backup becomes like the base for your clone. So
Yeah.
what you do is you create a brand new control file. That's like the city's blueprint. And then you use the backup and all the archived logs to rebuild the database up to the most recent state.
Hold on, back up. What exactly is a control file?
A control file is like a roadmap or a guide for the database. It's got all the important information about its structure and what's inside. Think of it like the city's master plan. It shows where everything is located and how it all fits together.
Okay, so it's like rebuilding the city from its blueprints and a recording of all the stuff that happened. So I'm guessing those archive logs are pretty important.
Absolutely. They're a record of every single change that has been made to the database. Without them, you'd have an incomplete replica missing all the crucial updates.
Gotcha. So we've got cloning with cold backups. There's also RMN backups. How do they fit into all this?
RMN stands for Recovery Manager. It's a really powerful tool for managing backups and recoveries in Oracle. It's kind of like having a specialized city planner who really understands cloning and helps make the whole process more efficient. There are two main scenarios here. One is where the target server where the clone is going to live has the exact same file structure as the original database. The other one is when the file structures are different.
Okay, that sounds like it could get a little complicated. Can you kind of break those down for us a little bit?
Yeah. So when the file structures are the same, it's pretty straightforward. You just restore the database from the RMN backup, and then you change its name using something called the NID utility. That's like moving the entire city to a new location that already been prepped with the exact same layout.
Okay, so pretty simple if everything's the same. What happens when the file structures are different, though?
In that case, RMN steps in and acts like a really smart city planner. It maps out where everything should go in this new city to make sure that transition is smooth. RMN handles all the complex details in the background so you don't have to manually transfer every single piece of data to its new location.
So that's pretty impressive. Sounds like Armament really does a lot of the work for you. Now, we read about some other cloning methods too that are a little bit more advanced, stuff like active database duplication. What makes that so special?
Active database duplication is like having a teleportation device for your database.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It was introduced in Oracle 11g, and it uses RMN to directly copy a live database over the network. You don't need to take the database offline or create separate backups beforehand.
Wow. So we're like beaming the entire city to a new location while everyone is still living in it.
Exactly.
I like it. So what are the benefits of using this method?
Well, it's super efficient because there's very minimal downtime. RMN basically handles all the complex steps, like creating the control file, copying the data files, recovering them, all without interrupting the source database.
That's pretty impressive. And what if you don't want to teleport the entire city, but you just want to kind of refresh its contents? The articles also mentioned something called backup-based duplication. Is that what that's for?
You got it. Backup-based duplication kind of combines the use of backups with the RMN duplicate command. It's like selectively upgrading certain parts of the city while keeping the overall structure in place.
Interesting. So what are some key things to keep in mind if someone's using this method?
Before you start, you need to make sure you validate a few things about the source database, like its size, its a unique identifier, and also its archiving mode. It's like checking the city's vital statistics before you start any major renovation project.
And what about on the target database side? What's happening over there?
On the target database, there are a few steps involved using something called an auxiliary instance. It's basically a temporary staging area where all the new elements are assembled and prepped before they're integrated into the main database.
Oh, okay. So it's like having a separate construction site where everything's prefabricated and then it gets moved into place.
Exactly.
I think I'm starting to get a better grasp on these different cloning methods. But before I move on, there's something I want to clarify. Our sources mention both cloning and refreshing. What exactly is the difference?
That's a great question. Think of it this way. Cloning is like moving to a brand new house and taking everything with you, all your furniture, all your appliances, decorations, everything. Refreshing is more like redecorating your existing house. You keep the same structure, but you might bring in new furniture, maybe paint the walls a different color.
So with cloning, you're copying the entire Oracle home, which is kind of like the engine of the database and the database itself, all the data. But with refreshing, you're only copying the data itself. So it's like getting new furniture for the same house.
Exactly. It's a small but pretty important difference.
Mhm.
Cloning creates a complete replica, while refreshing updates the content in that existing structure.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. So we've covered a lot here, from what cloning is to all the different methods involved, but I think I need a little bit of a break.
Sure. Let's take a pause and come back to this.
Sounds good. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how cloning is like moving to a whole new house and refreshing is more like redecorating. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about the WHY. The articles you sent highlight some really interesting reasons why someone would even want to clone an Oracle database.
Yeah, I was curious about that too. What are some of the most common use cases for this technology?
Well, think about it this way. You're a company, and you're about to release a huge software update. You don't want to risk anything messing up the live system, right? Cloning lets you create this separate, identical environment where you can thoroughly test that update before you release it to the public. It's like having a staging ground where you can work out all the kinks without affecting the real deal.
So it's all about mitigating risk and making sure that everything goes smoothly for the actual users. Makes sense. I bet developers also use cloning a lot too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Cloning is like a game changer for development teams because it lets them create these little isolated sandboxes where they can experiment, write code, test new features, all without worrying about breaking anything in the live environment.
It sounds like cloning really empowers them to be more creative and efficient. But wouldn't creating all these separate database copies take up a ton of storage space?
That's a good point. Storage space can be a concern, but there are ways to optimize it. Techniques like thin provisioning and snapshot technologies let you create these kind of virtual versions of the database that share some common resources. You don't have to replicate every single bit of data for each clone.
Oh, so it's like creating a more streamlined and efficient way to manage all these different environments. That's pretty smart. What are some other reasons why someone might want to clone a database?
Disaster recovery is another big one. Imagine there's a natural disaster or maybe a cyber attack, and a company's main database gets compromised. Having a clone ready to go, that can be activated right away. That can really save the day. It ensures that the business can continue operating, and it minimizes any downtime, which is really critical for any organization.
It's like having a backup plan for your data.
Yeah, like an insurance policy.
Exactly. Our sources also mentioned that database cloning can be used for training purposes too. How does that work?
Let's say you're training someone new on how to manage, like, an Oracle database. Instead of giving them access to the live system, where even a small mistake could have huge consequences, you can give them a cloned environment where they can practice and experiment without any risk.
Oh, so it's like a flight simulator, but for databases.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. It lets new team members get some real-world experience in a safe environment. Okay, so we've got testing, development, disaster recovery, and training. Are there any other interesting use cases for this technology?
Well, here's one that might surprise you. Historical data preservation.
Okay.
Imagine you've got a database full of really valuable historical records. Cloning lets you create a separate copy that researchers or even the public could access without messing with the integrity of the original data.
So it's like creating a digital time capsule.
Exactly. You're preserving all that important information for the future.
That's really cool. It opens up so many possibilities for research and education. I bet there are even more uses for cloning that we haven't even thought of yet.
Oh, for sure. Technology is always changing. I'm sure we're going to see some even more creative and impactful applications for this in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds. Well, this deep dive has really made me curious about all this. We've talked about the what, the why, and the how of Oracle database cloning, and it's clear that this is so much more than just a simple copy and paste. It's a really powerful tool with tons of different uses across all sorts of industries.
It really is. And like with any powerful tool, it's important to use it responsibly and ethically.
Yeah, that's a good point. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, if you could instantly clone any database in the world, which one would it be?
That's a good question. Let me think. I think I would clone the database that has all of human scientific knowledge that's ever been collected. Imagine having access to a record of every discovery, every invention, every breakthrough. That would be incredible.
That's a fantastic choice. It would be like having the ultimate encyclopedia of all of human ingenuity right at your fingertips. What about you? What database would you clone?
Ooh, that's a tough one. You know what? I think I'd clone the database that has all the different species of plants and animals on Earth.
Oh, wow. A complete catalog of life? I think that'd be incredible to have access to.
Yeah.
It really highlights the vast potential of all this, you know?
It does.
We've talked about so many different applications today, from making sure software is stable to preserving history. It's incredible to think that something that seems so technical, like database cloning, can have such a broad impact on like so many different things.
It really does touch every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And even if someone's not a tech expert, just understanding like the basics of this stuff, it can really help them appreciate how complex our digital world is.
It's like peeking behind the curtain and seeing how everything works.
Yeah.
All those little intricate details.
Exactly.
Who knows? Maybe listening to this will inspire some people to get into a career in technology.
That would be awesome.
I mean, it's a field that's constantly changing. And there's always a need for talented people who can manage and innovate with data.
For sure. That's a great point. There's so much potential in this field. And it's only going to become even more important as we rely more and more on data and technology.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive on Oracle database cloning, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, even though we're talking about cloning, it's important to remember that each database is unique in its own way.
Oh, okay.
It reflects the specific needs and goals of the organization that created it.
That's a great reminder. It's like, even though we can create these perfect replicas, there's still this human element behind each one.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Hopefully everyone found it informative.
Yeah, and maybe even a little mind-blowing.
Definitely mind-blowing. Thanks again for walking us through all of this.
It was my pleasure. Until next time, everyone, keep those databases running smoothly, and don't forget to back up your data.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.